10 years ago, I ran from my own graduation in tears after being publicly humiliated by a teacher who said I didn't belong. I had no money, no future, and no one believed in me, except one person. Last night, I returned to that same school, but not as a failure. This time, I walked in wearing heels, holding my husband's hand, and sponsoring the event that once tried to erase me. The corridor was cold that day, lit by a yellowing row of overhead lights and the warmth of late spring sun bleeding through dusty windows. I remember sitting on the windowsill, my knees pulled up, head resting on the glass. Graduation was supposed to feel like freedom, like the world opening its arms. But for me, it felt like the edge of a cliff. Home was a place I didn't talk about. The smell of cheap vodka on my father's breath, the bruises he didn't bother hiding anymore, and the way my mother would flick her cigarette ash into an empty soup can as she cursed life itself. There was no money for college. No savings, no scholarships, no fairy godmother. I had a bag of second-hand clothes, a folder of essays with red-inked praise from teachers who never fought for me, and a black cloud of fear trailing me everywhere. The only person who ever made me feel real, seen, was Luke. He was the class medalist, the golden boy. Teachers loved him, parents bragged about him, and everyone assumed he'd go far. But what most people missed was how quietly kind he was. That day, he sat beside me on the windowsill without asking. No judgment, just a soft smile and a joke about how we were all caged birds about to be set free with no idea how to fly. "You coming to the dance?" he asked, nudging me gently. I laughed. "I don't think I'm invited." "You're invited now," he said. "I'm asking." For the first time in weeks, I felt the tension in my chest lift. Like maybe I wasn't invisible after all. The moment shattered when Mrs. Whitaker entered, the head teacher, the one who always looked at me like I'd crawled out from under a rock. She held a clipboard like it was a sword, barking instructions about prom assignments and table setups. When she was done handing out rolls, I raised my hand timidly. "And what about me?" I asked. She didn't even look at me. "It would be better if you didn't come at all," she said, lips curled into a sneer. "Prom is no place for people like you." The class laughed. Some awkwardly. Others cruelly. I felt heat rush to my cheeks and stood up quickly, blinking back tears. I bolted from the classroom. Behind me, laughter echoed off the hallway walls. But just before the door swung closed, I heard Luke's voice. "Go away with your party." The laughter stopped. The silence that followed rang louder than anything. Luke turned away from his Gold Star future and walked after me. No hesitation. Just a quiet defiance that cracked the room's spine. Mrs. Whitaker's stunned face stayed with me for years. But that didn't stop her. Or the others. Graduation night came and went without me. I packed my things the next morning and walked out of that house, leaving behind the clinking of bottles and the stench of wasted dreams. My father said nothing. My mother called me ungrateful. But just before I left, my father handed me a small wad of old bills from a coffee tin beneath the sink. "Go," he said, avoiding my eyes. "You're not like us." That was the last time I saw him. I never went to prom. I never said goodbye. But life, my life, was just beginning. The morning I left town, the bus reeked of engine oil and tired dreams. I sat by the window, clutching the envelope of crumpled bills my father had given me like it was a lifeline. In a way, it was. I had no plan. No college acceptance. Just enough money to make it a few cities away and a backpack filled with thrift store clothes, a notebook of poetry, and a photo of me and Luke in front of the library, taken on a day I almost smiled for real. I told the school I was leaving to care for a sick aunt. A lie, but the kind no one questions when you come from nothing. When I picked up my certificate, Mrs. Whitaker gave me a look that could have sliced through glass. She handed me the folder without a word, her lips pinched like she'd just swallowed vinegar. A few other teachers gave half-hearted goodbyes, the kind you offer when you don't think someone's going to matter in the long run. I remember stepping onto that bus as the sun rose, casting gold over the cracked pavement of my hometown. I didn't look back. I was too scared that if I did, I'd lose the little courage I'd scraped together. Luke disappeared shortly after graduation. Rumors said his father sent him to some expensive boarding school upstate to prep for an Ivy League life. No one questioned it. People like Luke got second chances. People like me didn't get first ones. But I didn't need pity. What I needed was distance. The city was brutal at first. I rented a shared room in a basement apartment with peeling paint and 3 other girls who smoked out the window and cried into cheap ramen. I worked at a diner during the day, took online classes at night, and wrote articles for student blogs for $10 apiece. Every dollar went towards school. Every insult from rude customers and every scar from late-night dishwashing pushed me harder. I told myself that every person who laughed when I ran out of class that day, every eye that looked through me, was fuel. It took 4 years, but I got my degree. Communications and public relations. I worked with nonprofits first, then a small firm, then built something of my own. The world didn't hand me a single thing. But piece by piece, I carved a space that was mine. And then one night, 8 years after I left that town, I got a message. It was from Luke. "Do you remember the windowsill?" it read. I stared at it for an hour before replying. Every day. We talked for weeks after that. Turns out he'd walked away from the Ivy League plan his father built for him. He ran too, into photography, into quiet purpose, into a life that didn't belong to anyone else. When he asked to see me, I said yes. And when he asked if I'd come back with him, to sponsor our old school's 10-year reunion, I didn't hesitate. "I don't want revenge," I told him. "You don't need it," he said. "But maybe it's time they saw who you became." The invitation came in the mail 3 weeks later. Elegant script. School crest. A reminder of a place that tried to erase me. But this time, I was coming back. Not as a failure. Not as the girl on the windowsill. But as the woman who built her life from ashes. 10 years can change a person beyond recognition. But walking into that school gym again, it was like time folded in on itself. The walls were the same dull beige. The linoleum still groaned beneath every step. But the faces, oh, the faces, those had aged. Some gracefully. Others, less so. I arrived in a black satin dress, fitted but simple, elegant. Not flashy. I wasn't there to gloat. I was there to be seen. Luke stepped out first from the driver's side of the car. Still handsome, more grounded now. Then he opened my door, offering his hand like we were stepping into a ballroom, not a memory. People turned. Conversations dipped into silence. It was the kind of hush that spread slowly, like water under a closed door. "Is that her? Didn't she drop out?" "No, she ran away, remember?" "But, wait, isn't that Luke with her?" We walked in without saying a word. I held my head high, smiled at no one in particular, and let them whisper. Inside, the gym had been decorated with half-hearted streamers and rented lighting. A banner reading "Welcome Back, Class of 2015." hung askew over a cheap DJ booth. The crowd was mostly made up of the ones who'd stayed behind, small-town lifers with tired smiles and too tight dresses. There were familiar faces behind new weight, behind lines on foreheads, behind drinks held too tightly. Mrs. Whitaker was by the punch table, dressed in a blazer 2 sizes too small and still managing to look down her nose at the world. When she saw me, her drink froze midair. Her mouth parted. But she said nothing. And then Luke cleared his throat. "We're the sponsors of tonight's event," he said loudly, casually. "My wife and I." Wife. That was his idea, calling me that. Technically not true, not yet, but close enough. The word sliced through the crowd like a knife. A murmur spread. Heads turned. Someone clapped, confused and awkward. And then the teacher spoke. I didn't expect you to come back. I turned to face her. The same woman who once told me I didn't belong in a room like this. That I didn't belong at all. I'm not happy to see you, I said quietly, but you're part of the story. She blinked. Flushed. For a moment, I thought she might apologize. But she didn't. Instead, she gave a tight smile, turned away, and vanished into the crowd like a ghost unsure if it still had power. The rest of the night passed in fragments. Some old classmates came over with forced smiles, complimenting my dress, asking vague questions about what I'd been up to. I kept my answers short. Direct. Polite. Others didn't approach at all. Just stared. But the real shift happened when Luke took the mic for the sponsor speech. 10 years ago, he said, I walked out of this school with a diploma and the belief that success meant doing what I was told. But the real success story is standing beside me. He looked at me like I was the sun. I never expected to feel proud in that room. But I did. Not because of what I wore or who I came with, but because they finally had to see me. Not the broken girl from the windowsill, but the woman who survived them all. The music played low in the background now, some nostalgic pop ballad from our teenage years, looping behind the murmurs of polite conversations and the clinking of cheap wine glasses. I stepped out of the crowd, needing a breath of air, and ended up in the school hallway, the same one I had fled down all those years ago, holding back tears. It smelled the same. Old varnish. Floor cleaner. Dust and distant memories. I stood by the window again, staring out at the courtyard where students used to smoke behind the bushes and kiss in the shadows. And for the first time that evening, I let myself feel it, not the anger, not the need to prove anything, but the ache. The girl I used to be, she was still here, in some way. Hey. I turned. Luke leaned against the opposite wall, his tie slightly loosened, his eyes gentle. He'd always known when to show up quietly. You okay? I don't feel what I thought I'd feel, I admitted. What did you think you'd feel? Triumph. Revenge. I thought I'd walk in here and see her face, I gestured toward the gym, and I'd feel like I won. And now? I swallowed. I just feel tired. He nodded slowly, then pushed off the wall and came to stand beside me. You don't have to prove anything. You already did. I looked down at my heels, then back at the hallway. Then why do I feel like I lost something? Because you did, he said. You lost years. A piece of yourself. You lost the chance to have that moment back then, to feel like you mattered. And nothing tonight can give that back. I leaned against him. But I also found something, didn't I? He smiled. Yeah. You found you. A sudden hush fell behind us, and I knew someone had entered the hallway. I turned, and there she was, Mrs. Whitaker. Her blazer wrinkled now, her eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. I didn't expect you to come back, she said again, her voice quieter this time. Not after everything. I said nothing. I was wrong, she continued, fumbling with the strap of her purse. I saw a girl from a broken home and assumed she'd stay broken. That was cruel. I'm sorry. I waited, studying her face. She looked smaller. Not just older. Diminished in a way only time and guilt could cause. Thank you, I said finally. Just, thank you for not staying small, she added, her voice nearly cracking. For becoming who you became. Even if I couldn't see it then. I nodded. Luke whispered, you don't have to say anything else. I know, I replied. But I turned to her anyway. I forgive you, I said. Not because you deserve it. But because I do. She blinked, visibly stunned, and for the first time, I saw real regret in her eyes. Sometimes justice isn't revenge, Luke whispered again. It's a chance to rise above. I smiled at that. And in that hallway where I once ran away in shame, I stood tall and walked back toward the music. The gym lights had dimmed, casting soft golden shadows across the worn basketball court now masquerading as a dance floor. Couples swayed under the fairy lights strung lazily above them, swaying to a slow song that was probably chosen for nostalgia more than romance. I stood near the edge, watching the others, former classmates clinging to familiarity, dancing not just with each other but with the memories of who they used to be. Some had changed, some hadn't. A few were still reliving their glory days, pretending they hadn't peaked at 17. I was content just to watch. Until I felt a hand touch mine. "Luke. Can I still have that first dance?" he asked, voice low, warm, almost teasing. "Even if it's 10 years late." I laughed, breath catching somewhere between disbelief and something softer. "Even if it's all over?" I asked, half joking. He leaned in slightly, eyes locked on mine. "Maybe it's not over. Maybe it's just finally beginning." We stepped onto the floor. Slowly, easily. His hand on my waist, my arm resting gently on his shoulder. It wasn't the kind of moment I used to dream of, it was better. It was quiet. Real. Earned. Around us, the room changed. People stopped talking. A few paused mid-step. They saw us. Not just the class clown and the invisible girl from the windowsill, but the man and woman who had walked through fire and returned without ashes. We danced slowly. The music faded around us. There was no past in that moment. No broken childhoods. No missed proms. No cruel teachers or drunken parents. Just two people moving in time with something that felt like healing. "I used to think I'd never come back here," I whispered. "And now?" he asked. "I think I needed to. Just once. To remind myself that I left for a reason, and that I survived." He pressed a kiss to my temple. "You didn't just survive. You rose." As the song ended, a ripple of applause broke through the room. A few clapped politely. Others just stared. But it didn't matter. I hadn't danced for them. I'd danced for the girl I used to be. After the final dance, the room began to thin out. Coats were gathered. Air kisses exchanged. Polite, "Let's catch up sometime," lies floated through the air like confetti no one bothered to clean. But I stayed a little longer, standing near the old trophy case just past the gym doors. Behind the glass was a yellowed photo of the graduating class of 2015. There I was, back row, half-shadowed, chin tilted downward like I wasn't sure I deserved to be there. I remember that girl. I remember how hard she tried to disappear. Funny how life works. Luke wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. "You ready?" "Almost," I said quietly. I just needed to see her one more time. He didn't ask who I meant. He knew. I looked around at the nearly empty gym, the same place I was told I didn't belong. Now, I'd walked through it in heels that clicked like a heartbeat, with my name on the sponsor list and respect trailing behind me like a train. But the real triumph wasn't the silence I left in their mouths. It was the silence inside me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying the weight of not being enough. I wasn't angry. I wasn't proving anything. I was free. As we walked out into the night, the cool air hit me like a blessing. The stars above the parking lot shimmered brighter than they had 10 years ago. Or maybe I was just seeing them differently now. At the car, Luke paused and looked at me. "You okay?" I nodded. "I left here with nothing. And I came back with dignity. That's more than enough." He smiled, opening the car door. "Then let's go. Wherever you want. Wherever's next." I glanced back once, just once, at the building that had tried to define me. It didn't anymore. And then I got in the car and drove away with the man who saw me long before I saw myself. Because the truth is, you don't need revenge to rewrite your story. You just need to walk back into the fire, and walk out the other side whole.